Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Awaken Providence, Eternity, out October 21st on Unique Leader Records. The album has 9 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an American deathcore band. From a design point of view, this album is exactly where it needs to be, specifically when you have a record that is this volatile, that is this chaotic. You need something that brings it all together, that gives a sense of balance, that gives a sense of fluidity, and fluidity that is never interrupted. You don't want the album to be bumpy. You don't want the experience to be bumpy because you're going to lose the listener. You want the experience to be as fluid, as connected as possible so that the listener stays engaged with the record from start to finish. That way you get the most out of it. And that's what they created here. Connecting the songs in the way that they did, allowing tracks to bleed from one to the next, makes the record feel more together. It gives it a sense of cohesiveness. It allows the album to really pull strength towards the collective strength that already exists within the individual songs themselves. From a soundscape point of view, this album is interesting because first I listened to the record in my car and the experience that I had was quite different from the one that I had once I listened to it on my headphones. I was able to dive a lot deeper. I was able to tell certain elements apart that I wasn't able to do so when I was listening to it in my car. So I think the mixing, the production behind this album at times hides a few pieces or a few nuances that are extremely important for the overall record to work. Because when you look at this album, you see the aggression in the sound, you see the thickness, you see the volume. The problem is that volume, that aggression, and that thickness sometimes blurs the lines between the elements, making it very hard to tell what's driving what and what's creating what impact, not just to the experience, not just to the sound, but to the atmosphere of the tracks and the record. This takes a little bit away from the album because you lose what's underneath the surface. And for a record like this, you have to see what's above the surface, but also feel what's underneath it. Now, the orchestrations on this album are perhaps that element that loses the most, depending on where you're going with it or how you're interacting with this album. When I was listening to it in the car, the orchestrations didn't have the same impact as they did when I listened to them on the headphones. Having said that, they could still have a much bigger impact than what they did. I felt like most of the times the orchestrations were there, creating nuance, creating melody, adding a thin layer, a very thin layer of atmosphere. And if you're gonna have them on the album as predominantly as they did on this record, you want them to come into the forefront every so often and have a very direct and positive impact on how you perceive the record, on the lyrical content of the album, pushing that lyrical content into the forefront, allowing you to see 4 dimensions. And this album doesn't necessarily give you that perception or that depth with the orchestrations in terms of how they were placed within the mix. I think this is the only soft spot, or at least one of the main soft spots that the record offers. Because when you look at the drums and guitars, there's strength in both. The drums on this album are solid as they should be, creating aggression, creating heaviness, really becoming the motor and the heartbeat that pushes every single song forward, grounding the album but not stopping the album. The guitars move the record as well. They have a lot of diversity, a lot of the chaos that I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the volatility is present with the guitar sound and how far it bounces off of both extremes, the melodic and the heavy. Important aspect for any record and really important on this album. I enjoyed the execution, the solos, the leads, the melodies, everything surrounding the guitar work on this record was outstanding. It really surpassed my expectations and had a positive impact on every single song. The vocals become a little bit of the second softer spot, if you will, that this album offers, specifically with the clean vocals. Not that I didn't like the clean vocals on the album, but I felt like at times they were a little bit lost in the struggle. They didn't have a clear path. They didn't have a clear focus in terms of what they were there for and what are we trying to create with them. They were there, they gave a jolt to those individual tracks, but that was about it. I wanted a little bit more depth of thought process when it comes to the clean vocals. I want them to interact much better with the lyrical content and with the atmosphere of the songs, using those orchestrations, tie them in with the clean vocals, pump them into the forefront, make the listener feel, why are they there, what are they adding, what kind of value can they bring to the table, because that value was there with the harsh vocals. The range within those harsh vocals was phenomenal throughout the entire album. It gave aggression, it gave power, it gave heaviness, it created a sense of contraction and expanding, really helping create movement within the songs and moving the barometer within each individual track that this album offers. So from that side of the vocal range, everything was on point. The clean vocals, while solid, while sounding great, I just felt like they were a little bit lost within the overall design, and that doesn't bring that much value to the table. All around, this is a great sounding album. It's not perfect by no means. It could be better. The production could be a lot better if, once again, you push those orchestrations into the forefront, not all the time, but ever so often within certain songs, so that the atmosphere becomes a little bit more noticeable, a little bit more predominant in the overall vibe that the tracks offer. But outside of that, in the clean vocals, the record offers a lot of positives, therefore more positives than negatives all around. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Hunt of the Wraith. Demolishing from the start. This is the first installment of a trilogy of 3 tracks that come back to back to back. Now, this track is heavy, it's brutal, both musically and vocally. The orchestrations create a melodic underbelly. I wish that underbelly became more than just the underbelly throughout the track, because it would have given the song a little bit more life, but it just stayed underneath the surface. The guitars help expand the track, and the clean vocals give it a jolt, change your perception of where you're going with this. What is this song all about? It doesn't define where you're going, but it changes your perception of the path that's in front of you. Now, the guitar solo on this track is excellent. It adds value to the song, it adds value to the experience, and it adds a little bit of the atmosphere that was perhaps lacking up until that point. Overall, the guitar execution throughout this entire song is what gives life to the track itself. This is a song that, while not necessarily putting the guitars on a pedestal, the overall guitar performance, guitar playing, guitar execution is outstanding throughout the entire song, allowing the track to jump into the forefront. Next, you have the Book of Eldridge. This is the second part of this trilogy. Now, one song bleeds into the other, so there's this sense of perfect continuity between these 2 tracks, and that allows you to feel those choirs and that orchestration to have a bigger impact in the second song because of that transition between both tracks. Now, this creates a darker atmosphere. The atmosphere on this song is more palpable, easier to see, easier to detect, easy to hear it. Feeling the sound in the aggression that it has, this track has a lot more than its predecessor. Almost like the predecessor was at 10 and they moved the knob all the way to 11 as far as that aggression, as far as that movement. The clean vocals have a better impact in this song because they feel more formatted into the overall design of the track. So it's easier for the listener to understand why they're coming, when they are coming, why they're there, and you can see the impact that they have in the ebbs and flows of the track. Better purpose allows for a better song all around. This song is more vocally driven. While the previous track was more guitar driven, this one is more vocally driven. Not just because the clean vocals and the purpose that they offer, but also because of the harsh vocals and what do they give and the range that they provide from start to finish. Now, the last part of this trilogy is the Court of the Trinity, and this track also starts off as the previous one ends. So once again, bleeding from one into the next. This song is a little bit of the 2 previous songs coming together as one. It's relentless. It feels a lot more linear than the 2 previous tracks. All the elements that we saw in the 2 previous songs, either be the guitar performance in the first one or the vocal prowess in the second one, everything is compacted into this third one. The pieces that we saw, the breadcrumbs that we saw in the 2 previous songs come together here, and this allows this final piece of this trilogy to have a much bigger impact to really feel like it brings it all together. And all three tracks, when you look at them as one, really feel as one. They're different chapters of a much larger song, and this one gives it the final conclusion to those chapters, and it puts it with an exclamation mark right at the end. I really enjoyed this trilogy. It was a really interesting element of the record. It was nice to see a sense of progression between them, using different elements to lead the tracks and then bringing it all together in the final one. This is it, Awaken Providence Eternity, out October 21st on Unique Leader Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.